Okay, members, we have several people here today that we have requested to come forward, and Mr. Secretary LeBlanc, if you would come up first, we'd like to hear from you. Mr. Secretary, if you can just introduce yourself, and then I'm going to ask you a few questions, and then let the other members ask you some questions as well.
Yes, sir. Jimmy LeBlanc, Secretary of Public Safety and Corrections.
Secretary LeBlanc, one of the things I've learned through the process of this committee is we've looked at some of the organizational charts, and it was confirmed for me that although Colonel Davis is the head of his agency, that he actually comes under you in the organizational chart as part of your department. Can you tell us how the structure generally works?
Yeah, of course, I think Nally explained to y'all the history of our department and how it all worked out, where at one time we were separated agencies, and when during the constitutional changes that were being made, that the 20 agency limit, and they took DEQ out from under natural resources and made another agency, is when they combined us, and from that, we were combined, but over the last, I can attest to over 30 years that this department has been separated from state police. Even though constitutionally we report that way, I actually send the letters to President Cortez on the appointment of the deputy secretaries, which is a deputy secretary of corrections, a deputy secretary of state police or public safety, and a deputy secretary of OJJ. So the statutes kind of cover the responsibilities in those areas. The only function I have with the public safety and state police is the fact that I do sign their leave slips, I do sign their payroll, and I delegate the authority to them to operate their agencies accordingly. So that's kind of how it works. In my time, and I know the 16 years prior to me assuming this position in 2008, that's the way it's worked all through those years.
And you're one of the cabinet secretaries, and it's my understanding the superintendent of state police participates in the cabinet meetings.
That's correct. They attend the cabinet meetings just like the rest of the cabinet heads.
And in your position, do you get involved with investigations within state police?
No, sir. Not at all. Nothing in operational issues with state police.
Some of the members would like to ask some questions. Senator Fields.
Good morning, Secretary LeBlanc.
Good morning.
And I understand how it has been operating for the past 30 years, so it just didn't start, in the past 4 years or 6 years. This is the way we have allowed it to happen, so to speak. When DEQ became a department, we had to take state police out of the Constitution. So, do you supervise state police?
No, sir. Not at all. Let me add one thing on with OJJ in particular, because you passed a statute, the legislature passed a statute that requires the OJJ deputy secretary to report directly to the governor. It was done by statute, probably in the neighborhood of 20 years ago, maybe, in that neighborhood. So that was done by statute.
Mm-hmm. So from a budgetary perspective, do any of state police or the Office of Public Corrections, public safety rather, do any of their budget come through your office?
No, sir.
It's kind of hard to supervise someone you don't have there. So you don't have any budgetary restraints on public safety?
No, sir. They operate totally independent with their budget, and in the budget hearings, they have their own hearings. It's set up by the Appropriations Senate Finance separately from our hearings.
Hmm. And I mean, our statutes say one thing, and our budget, I guess the way we appropriate the money is a little different, because our statute clearly states that as secretary, all of it is under your department. But I looked at the schedules, and the schedules are a little different, so it's kind of hard to supervise an agency where the money doesn't actually come through you.
Yes, sir.
But you do appoint these individuals, and under the statute, you are to supervise them. But I can't hold you to that because you literally don't have the funding, and that's kind of difficult. And I guess that's more of our problem. We would have to give you the funding to actually hold them accountable. And then the other problem is I just don't know, and I've been thinking hard, and I got a couple bills left. I don't know how corrections and public safety work. I mean, that's just like an odd match.
It is, definitely.
I mean, how do you, on one hand, you incarcerate, and on the other hand, you're supposed to be, why do you think that the legislature put public safety and corrections together to begin with?
Senator, I'd hate speculating on that. I don't have any idea. And it was done a long time ago. I guess they felt like it was a good match at the time, but I agree with what you're saying. It's really not a good match. I mean, I think it's two separate responsibilities, and we keep them. We have the prisons, and they are enforcement. So it's really kind of it really doesn't fit well, and that is another reason why to keep us separated as far as operations go.
Well, let me ask you, where under the 20 departments we have, and I've been trying to figure out where would be the appropriate place to put state police or public safety. If you had to put public safety somewhere other than corrections, where would you put it?
When you look at other agencies, and I don't have that list in front of me, I don't know that they would fit anywhere else, Senator. I really don't. I mean, if we're going to have to, keep public safety as, part of an agency, then I think that is the fit. I don't think there's any other agencies that I can recollect that would be more appropriate than we are.
Yeah. And I kind of think you're right, because I've gone through all of the agencies, and I guess that was the quagmire that the legislature had, 30 some odd years ago, is where to put public safety, and I guess they just had to put it in corrections, and
Yes, sir.
and that's not the place to put it, quite frankly. And I guess that's one of the challenges we have. We have to either increase the number of departments, or we have to, because we have a contradiction now. We have a big contradiction. We got corrections, public safety under corrections, but it's really not. And it's really not because we don't give you the money. We send the money directly to state police, to public safety.
Yes.
And let's be honest, public safety is although we can't have but 20 departments, we really got 21 departments.
Yes, sir. That's right.
And the only reason why we putting the spotlight on it today is because that 21 department, that state police has a flashlight on it now, and we got to rein it in, and no one is supervising it. It's just out on its own, and partly we are to blame for it, and so we got to fix it. And I don't have the answers, but we all got to collectively come up with the answer, because we got an agency that's unsupervised, quite frankly. And under the statute, it's supposed to be supervised by you, but you can't supervise an agency that you don't have the money. They get their money directly from us. We don't even send you the money. And then, quite frankly, I don't think corrections should be supervising public safety. That doesn't make sense.
Yes, sir. I agree totally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Boudreaux for some questions.
Yeah, good morning, Secretary.
Morning, Senator
LeBlanc.
Boudreaux.
Yes, indeed. And I guess just a couple of observations, and Senator Field said he has a couple bills left, so we'll sit tight to see if we can figure out this quagmire from some standpoint. My comments are basically just to offer my commendations for your leadership. While I agree wholeheartedly with everything Senator Field said, that this is not how it should be. It's what you inherited and what we have inherited, and I too have no answer as to where else, other than going back to add another agency, another department under that. But in the meantime, corrections is a large, and we've spent some time in finance. I mean, we spent a lot of money on corrections, and we've gone through a lot. But I just wanted to commend you for your leadership, and for your ability to continue to look at innovative ways to do it, and at the same time, while statutorily state police falls under you, I have not been aware of any instances where you have put state police underneath the bus. You have handled it in a professional manner, and I just want to take time to say thank you for that. And I know state police is here, and of course they understand where we are, and they're working with it. So my brief comments were just to acknowledge that we feel like we have a problem, but no one has been able to see how. So at the end of the day, I think just the public awareness is probably the most important thing at this time, that we can continue to say that we don't feel that it's a fit. We feel they should be separated, and in my opinion, I think state police we need to go back to the people and change it and call it like it is. It's a spade, and let's call it a spade.
Yes,
and
sir.
not continue to pretend that just because to comply with the statute that they're underneath corrections when they're actually not. And they are operating as a full-fledged agency. So that's all I had this morning. I want to just thank you again for your leadership and for everything that you're doing to contribute to hopefully us coming to some resolution with this, which, as I said, Senator Field said he has a couple bills. Maybe some wisdom will come from somewhere, and we'll be able to see how we move to the next step. But again, I appreciate everything that you have done, continue to do, and working with each and every one of us to make sure that those dollars that we spend on corrections, we continue to treat those who are incarcerated with dignity and respect. And in closing, we talked about it as it relates to our veterans. And again, some of these things go unnoticed, but we're trying to do everything that we can to help those, like I said, that are veterans and have made some mistakes.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Senator Boudreaux. I appreciate those remarks.
Thank you, Senator. Any further questions from the members of the committee for the Secretary? Secretary, I want to thank you again for coming down today. I mean, when we started this committee, our mission is to look for recommendations and ways we can improve state police and assist them with oversight. And we've learned a lot of things through this process. I certainly have learned a lot of things. So these are issues we want to try to do to help state police become even a better agency than it is.
Sir. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to call Lieutenant Johnny Brown, who works with state police. This was at the request of one of our members.
Right here?
Wherever you're comfortable, Lieutenant.
Okay. I've asked Ms. Holland to sit with me, please.
And she's the general counsel for state police. But go ahead, Ms. Holland. And Lieutenant Brown, I want to thank you for coming down today as well. I believe you're in North Louisiana now?
Yes, sir.
To testify. We are looking for, once again, to get some general information for you. We're not looking to get into specific cases that are under investigation. So if you could go ahead and introduce yourself to us and tell us what your job title is and position with state police.
Okay. I'm currently a lieutenant with the Louisiana State Police. I work for the Criminal Investigation Division of the Louisiana State Police, and my job duty is to be the officer in charge of the Monroe Field Office for Criminal Investigations, and that's in Monroe.
And how long have you had that position?
I've had this position for 2 years. Prior to that, I was A little over 2 years, and prior to that, I was the supervisor or the sergeant over the detectives division within that same agency.
Very well, very good. Thank you. Senator Jackson has some questions for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning.
Good
I
morning.
drove last night. Did you drive this morning?
I drove this morning. Yes,
Oh,
I did.
Lord, you did what I usually do. I tried to get in late, but thank you for coming. And thank you for your service. You've been invaluable to Troop F. And so I want to say that to you. I
Thank you.
know that the work that you do. And so I am going to say this. I'm going to ask general questions, but I'm an attorney, so the chairman may give me the side eye if I go too far into it, because I do that sometimes in these meetings. And so I want to, but I am going to ask some general questions at any time. If there's something I ask you that you're not comfortable answering, please stop me. And I talk fast and consult with your attorney. And she's
Yes,
sitting
ma'am. I'm
right
from
there.
North Louisiana, and I talk slow, so give me.
See, so as he says, one end of the spectrum to the other one with us, right? And so I'm going to slow down a little bit. In your time in investigations with Troop F, you've supervised various detectives.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and so what type of incidents do your detectives usually investigate?
A wide range of crimes, virtually anything in the Title 14.
Okay, and what about officer-involved incidents?
That is another thing that we investigate.
So does that come directly to you? Is your department the initial investigator of officer-involved incidents in our area, or does it go to someone else first?
No, it's by reference. It's generally we are contacted typically by another department, whether it be a sheriff's department or police department, that's involved. And I would say that's the overwhelming majority of cases involving officer-involved shootings or in custody deaths that we've done.
Okay. And do you investigate officer-involved shootings, injuries, deaths, in custody deaths of the state police?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So when they involve the state police, do they come directly to you? Like, are you the first arm of the investigation, or does it go to someone else, the other department, before it comes to you?
Okay, a typical scenario would be if there was an arrest made and someone died in custody, that there's going to be a phone call made directly to me.
Okay.
Most of the time. I mean, it can go through the troop if it's another agency that would work its way to me, but I would ultimately get the call and then make assignments from there.
So you only investigate Troop F, within the state police officer involved incidents. You only investigate Troop F?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. But over Northeast Louisiana, you would investigate as well any other agency that that was referred to you?
Yes, ma'am. That's more common than state police investigations.
Okay. And how long have you been with the state police?
I've been with the state police since 2003. I've been in law enforcement since 1987.
Okay. And how long have you been in the investigation unit? I may say that wrong.
Since 2007. I was on the road for approximately 4 years and then went into the detectives division of the Louisiana State Police in 2007.
Okay. So you would have been a part of all officers involved, state police, let me rephrase that. Since 2007, you would have been a part of officers involved investigations in Troop F since 2007.
It's best to say a majority of them. There could have been an occasion when I may have been off or something else, and others took on the role. But for a majority of those cases, all of the detectives, there's only 4 of us.
Oh, 'cause only 4
So
of you.
we would all respond to the scenes initially, and then it would be assigned out after that.
Okay. So basically, whoever on duty responds to the scene,
Yes, ma'am.
and that may be any of the 4.
Yes, ma'am. There's 4 detectives and a sergeant, which is typically, or what we've had majority of the time that I've been there. And in major crimes, whether it's a homicide or anything like that, the whole crew would respond.
Okay. Even if it's at 1 o'clock at night, they pull all of you out of bed.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I'm not going to ask about a particular incident because I know a lot is under investigation, but I am going to ask somewhat pointed questions, and this is where I'm going to slow down. You may at some point want to consult your legal counsel. During your time at state police, has there ever been an investigation where you recommended an arrest of a state police officer where one of your superiors did not follow your recommendation?
When advised to cancel, I'm not
Okay.
supposed to answer.
That's a general question. That is a general question, so I'm going to ask the council to state on the record why can't the gentleman ask a general question, because I'm not asking about a particular investigation.
I think that goes beyond just procedure. I believe that that question is more of a cross-examination of this particular witness, and he is a part of an ongoing criminal
I know, but we're
investigation.
not asking about a particular criminal investigation. When we were here last time, as advised by yourself and others, we could not ask about particular investigations where we were allowed, with your last witness, to ask general questions about his time at state police. This is why this committee has been invoked. And so I hope we're not waiving every privilege that we didn't waive, asserting privileges that were not asserted last time, because these are the same questions I asked last time.
Well, and this particular witness has not waived any of his Fifth Amendment rights, and he will be called as a witness in other criminal cases, and we would not want him to be cross-examined here. But if you have any questions about as far as the procedures that he follows, but to ask him, has he ever not followed an order?
I didn't ask him, did he follow? I
Let
said
me,
in his time.
intervene here real quick. First of all, can you state your name for the record?
My name is Gail Holland. I'm the Deputy General Counsel for the Office of Legal Affairs at DPS.
So, Senator Jackson, why don't we do this? Let's ask the questions that he can answer, and then at the end of that, we can then address the
I
questions that he
think
can't
my
answer.
question was misunderstood. I didn't ask him, had he ever not followed procedure. I said, in your time at state police, in any investigation, did he recommend the arrest of an officer and his supervisor did not take his recommendation? I was not incriminating him. I wouldn't do that.
Once again, it's up to you if you want to answer the question. If you don't feel comfortable, you have that right.
Yes, ma'am, I've
gonna
made that
answer.
recommendation before.
Okay, and has it not been followed before?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, on how many occasions would you say you've made a recommendation for a state trooper to be arrested under an officer-involved investigation? I know you may not remember all of them, but estimate how many times?
Well, I do remember all of them and only
Yes.
once.
Only once, okay. And who was your supervisor at the time?
My direct supervisor was Lieutenant Gary Beasley.
Did you make that recommendation to Gary Beasley?
Yes, made it through him.
You made it through him, so you know he received that recommendation, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And who else received that recommendation in hierarchy?
You just want me to name everyone?
Yes.
We're getting specific here again
This is
into
not-
into a specific incident, and so once again, I know we're going to talk generally about what he does and his policy, but I don't want to get too deep into. I really don't want to get involved at all into an ongoing investigation that could hurt what they're trying to do.
Okay, no problem. I guess my thing is, and Mr. Chairman, I'm asking general questions because I thought we were here to deal with policy and who best implements that policy.
We are, but now when you start going into individual names, then we're getting into personnel versus positions.
Personnel. Okay, I thought we were getting into that, no problem.
And we can certainly, whoever the people were in place in the hierarchy is in record somewhere where we can get that documentation if you would like that.
Okay, well, I would like that. What year was this? So I can make sure I'm requesting the correct hierarchy list.
This incident involved the Ronald Green incident.
Okay, so I'm not going to ask you about particular incidents. That's why I'm asking around it. What year did you make a recommendation and it was not followed? So I can get that hierarchy list.
2019.
2019. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to request from the department who would have in hierarchy been the persons making decisions in 2019 regarding Lieutenant Brown's recommendation at that time. Any recommendations in 2019? Let me make it general. In officer-involved incidents, with the state police being those officers who would have been in the hierarchy chain that would not have followed and detectives' recommendation to arrest.
Ms. Hawley, can you provide the information of who the particular people were in place in those positions in the chain of command at that time. If you could provide that to the committee, we'd appreciate it.
I will submit that to the
Thank you.
committee.
And we'll get that to the committee members, Senator Jackson. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, in in any incidents that you were investigating in, like, let's go from 2018 to 2021, who would have been the 4 detectives working with you? Well, the 3, because it's 4 of you guys, so you count as 1, right?
That could have changed, that number could have changed, so please don't hold me to it, because we've had quite a bit of turnover in the state police during this time. Do you want me to name them, or just the number?
If it's okay with the chairman, if not, I'll ask for that list as well.
Why don't we also get, Ms. Holland, if you can give us a list of the people that were there at that time period, so we make sure that it's an accurate record of who was actually there in place.
Will do.
Thank you. Now I'm going to go through to some procedure that would have been in place while you were there. I know procedure changes over the years, but is there a general procedure? It's 4, sometimes 5. I understand the number changes based on turnover. When you're first called out to officer-involved incident, what happens?
Depends on the incident, to be generalized. I mean, if there's a crime scene, obviously you want to control that crime scene immediately. So you get your guys, and typically we have a drive. We have 12 parishes, so it's generally we're not within 15 minutes of the scene. We could be as an hour and a half away from a scene. On other incidents, what we try to do is know where the scene's at and know where the pieces are at that we need to respond to. I'll give you an example. If there's a scene, I want to make sure that some of the resources go to the scene to control that scene and start documenting the scene. If there's people already at a hospital, typically by the time we get involved, people have been removed from the scene or located elsewhere, then I'll send a group there as well to go ahead and start that process. And then, so it all depends on each situation as to how you split your resources up.
Okay. And once you, because I don't want to get in particulars, so procedurally, you get the scene under control, and then how does your investigation ensue if there's been an officer-involved incident?
Again, depends upon the incident. An in-custody death is different from an officer-involved shooting.
Okay, let's go with in-custody death first. How is the investigation process for in-custody death?
Okay, the process is still a scene, find out where the scene's at, find out where the deceased is at, and then find out where the officers are at. And then we're going to begin questioning people. That's what you do. You start trying to collect the evidence. A modern investigation involves now making sure you secure all the electronic stuff, which is your videos, your radio traffic, all the calls that are associated with it, any surveillance video. So you have a group start collecting that, and then you have people start finding out who the witnesses are, especially those witnesses that can come and go real quick. If there's anybody on scene, so you take care of those first. Because we're dealing with officers, generally you can set them to the side just a little bit, because you're going to be able to come back and address those issues in a more timely manner. So that would be a typical circumstance.
Okay, and so after you leave the scene, do you continue investigating in-custody deaths at that point?
Once we leave the scene?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. These things could last weeks.
Okay, so you talked about body cameras. Is that something that you use to assess investigations?
Absolutely.
Okay, and I may be stopped, and so I'm going to ask this question slowly. I'm learning to ask certain questions slowly. In your time at state police, has there ever been times that officers did not turn over their body cameras to you?
I wouldn't answer that question.
Without speaking of any particular or specific incidents?
Do you want to answer it? No.
I'm well aware of this this is being investigated by the federal investigators, and just within the last couple of weeks, I'm well aware of the issues within this case. I am confident that...
I don't want to ask about a specific case.
Well, I know,
Right.
but just to explain, if I say yes, then I'm going to have to include the fact that I'm well aware that there's investigations into that those procedures are being looked at and investigated, and I am aware of that.
Okay. So,
Because the short answer is yes, once,
Yes.
and it's being investigated.
Thank you. In those times, what happens procedurally? Who do you, and I know we're getting your chain of command, if you find at any point in an investigation that an officer did not turn over his or her body cam to you, who do you report that to? Which department at that point?
And Lieutenant Brown, once again, the position, we're not looking at specific names.
Yeah,
but
just
what's the position
position.
that you would report to?
Talk to me. Would that be Scott?
No. If the question is, what do I do if I find there's additional evidence?
If they find there's additional
I make
evidence.
sure that that evidence is secured. I'll collect it, no matter whether I collect it at the time or I collect it, say, 2 years from now. And I'll use any case for an example. It could be a homicide case, and that's typical to go work a scene, work a case, even make an arrest, and then say maybe find the murder weapon some 6 months later. What do you do with it? Well, then you have to collect it just like you would have collected it the night before.
Right,
In
right.
these cases, we do what we call supplemental reports to make sure it's a part of the record, and then we notify the district attorney. So those would have been the steps that I would take if I found additional evidence, whether it's a video or whatever the case might be.
Okay. In your investigation, if an officer had been untruthful with you about his or her evidence, body camera, otherwise, and that comes to your attention during your investigation, then an officer has been, in your detective work, intentionally or what you feel to be intentionally untruthful about evidence, who do you report that to? Not the person, but the position.
I'm going to document it just like I would any other evidence, and I'm going to report it to the district attorney's office.
Okay. And so you would report that officer or just that evidence? How do you deal in your investigations, what I'm asking, with an officer who has been untruthful or hid evidence?
Yes, it is evidence to me.
Right.
Okay, and what I do and what I think our responsibilities are is a detective, is to make sure that we document the facts of the case, whatever those facts are. And if the facts determine that someone has not been truthful with us, then so be it. It's our job is to document it, thoroughly document it,
Right.
and provide that evidence to the district attorney, and make sure that the district attorney understands what that evidence means. So that's how I would deal with whether it's an officer or whether it's anybody who I believe has not been truthful.
Okay,
I would
makes
try to
sense.
provide the evidence to the district attorney so he could make a decision himself.
I understand that, but I guess, let me ask, in those instances, there's no hierarchy of reporting an officer not being truthful with an investigation or not being cooperative with an investigation. How do you guys deal with that internally? Because you're investigating. You're probably going to be the first person to know that an officer has been distruthful in the investigation or that he or she has not provided all of the evidence. How do you guys deal with that at the state police? Because then there's an issue, red flag, and how do you address that red flag? Because reporting it to the DA, I understand. But how do we deal with that at state police internally, that an officer has not followed protocol? Because it's protocol, let me go back to this. It's protocol for any officer who's on the scene to provide you their body cameras when you ask, right?
Yes, ma'am.
It's protocol for them to be honest with you that they've had a body camera on them. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And it's protocol that they tell you the truth about everything that happened at that scene. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
So when an officer breaks any of that protocol that is expected of he or she, how do you ensure, as a detective, what's in place that someone in the hierarchy of state police understands that that officer has violated his oath and his protocol?
Okay. The easy answer there, from an administrative point of view, is I certainly have a chain of command answer to, and I do involve my chain of command, especially if it involves a state trooper. I'm going to notify my chain of command of what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Okay. And so has there ever been a time that you've asked, without telling me who your chain of command is and talking about a particular incident, that you've notified someone in your chain of command that an officer on the force has been untruthful or failed intentionally to provide information in an investigation?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Around how many times would you say that's been?
I can only recall one occasion.
And internally, was that officer disciplined when you provided that information?
Again, I think we're getting off into the ongoing
Investigation. Okay, thank you. I'll respect that. And so at that time, you basically hear from, and I'm going procedurally, once you report that officer, do you hear from internal affairs who begins to investigate that matter? Like just procedurally, if you turn an officer in during your investigation because they hadn't followed protocol or failed to give body camera or was intentional in hiding information, who does that investigation go to?
Yes, ma'am, I'm not aware of the procedures once an internal
Okay.
investigation. Unless I'm called as a witness, then I would only be involved in what I actually said. But as far as being, knowing what occurred during an administrative investigation, no, sir. No, ma'am, excuse me, I do not.
So the only time you would be called is as a witness at that point,
Yes, ma'am.
and it's not reported back to you the results of the what you reported.
No, ma'am.
Okay. So let's talk more about body cams. And I'm not going to go over your, can you tell me about the current system that exists right now with body cameras? You're an investigator. At this point, you're still over the investigation unit of Troop F. Let's say an officer involved shooting, because I'm going to go to incidents later, happens, and there's an officer in custody death. Right now at Troop F, do you have access to all of the videos from that incident?
I do now.
You do now. When did that become possible?
In late 2019.
In late 2019. Now, do you have to request those videos, or tell me how that goes now?
There may be some requests that I have to make, but I do have access to them. I'm not going to say that I can go in and do anything with those videos, because I think that there's been some changes within the system that I'm really not that familiar with. But I have complete confidence that if I need to go into the system, that I can go in and I can do research now.
Okay, so let's say it's 5 troopers out on the scene at that time, because I'm trying to understand this new system. And with those 5 troopers, 3 of them have body cams. How do you go in and identify those 3? Because I know it's loads and loads of body cams uploaded. We had that at one of the meetings. How do you go and identify those body cams now?
The search criteria is fairly simple once you get into the system. You can do it by name, you can do it by date, you can do it by section. So you can break down the search criteria to find things. There is policy that dictates that once these videos are uploaded into the system, that the officers are responsible for actually going in and labeling those systems, which is another way to go access them.
Okay.
So that is if you use what I've done since I've had access, I generally deal with the officer's name, and then I go to they've labeled it. Say there's an incident on US 167. It will be something labeled there that I can easily identify as being what I'm looking for.
So when you go in, all 3 videos are there labeled based on the incident's name. Okay. Do you have to request permission to view those videos, or are you immediately granted access to them once you find them?
And it's because I don't know of the current rule changes, and that's because I know that prior I didn't have to have permission. I may have to get permission now to look at them, but I can still find them now.
I understand.
But I can monitor, or I can go in and I can look at those videos.
But you have to request permission. I know you can find them. Now I'm saying viewing those. You find 3 videos. What's the procedure in requesting to view those videos?
I don't know the current system at this moment, and that's my fault. They told me. I just
No problem. You hadn't had to do it.
Yes, ma'am. I admit I did.
Okay. Is someone here that knows that procedure? And do you want me to stick to one
No,
witness?
let's stick to this witness right
Okay.
now, and
And
then
I'll
Colonel
come
will
up
hear
with
from you
on
at the end. The Colonel will.
I
be coming
forgot
back.
we don't do that together, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. And so you ask or something, there's a procedure where you get access to those videos. Now, nothing now is dependent, or is it, on the officer correctly labeling their video? Are you guys still somewhat dependent on that officer uploading and correctly labeling that video by incident?
Yes, I think we do depend upon that. At least I would expect that. But a lot of that's timing too, is depends on how long after the incident that I'm actually doing this review. I'm well aware that there's cases where an officer may have to go do something else, and these downloads take time. They have to actually take the camera in, they put it into a little device, and then it uploads, I understand, automatically to the system, and then they have to log in and change it. Some of these videos could take hours to upload.
Right, right.
So, again, I don't access it that much, but I don't see it being a problem getting in and finding the information once you have access to it.
Right. Now, what if an officer uploads a video and doesn't label it by the incident? Is it a way 2 or 3 weeks down the line, you're still investigating because you said it take a while, that you can go in and put in a date and time and pull up all videos from that date and time?
You can do that, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is that something that you guys are generally practicing now?
I haven't had to do it.
Okay.
Okay. But I can say now that if I do log in, I'm certainly going to look at that group of videos that surround that time frame, because it's obviously in reference to a certain time, and
Right.
if say something happened at 10 a.m., then I'm going to expect all videos around 10 a.m. to be associated with that event, whether they're labeled or not.
Okay, so that's what I was asking. So it gives you a general time frame of dropping videos for that time frame.
Yes, ma'am.
So if an officer inadvertently doesn't label something, you still have access to it.
Yes, ma'am.
Now that's an in custody death. So you now have everything. Let's go to you. There's times where you have an in custody death, and in your investigations, is there times where you've ruled that the officer did nothing wrong? Is that correct?
There's times when my opinion was that.
Right. That's what I'm saying. When your opinion.
No.
When your opinion. So with those, what happens with those reports?
Same thing. All these reports go to the district attorney's office.
So regardless of what happens, you still have to submit it to the district attorney's office.
We do.
Okay. And you testified that you submit supplements as other evidence becomes available to you.
Yes, ma'am. If there's any witness statements, any evidence, or anything that happens after the initial report is turned in, we conduct what we do, a supplemental report, and attach that.
And are you free to meet with the DA, whoever that DA, because you're covering 12 parishes. So are you free to meet with that DA or any DA on a case as frequently as the investigation unit feels necessary?
I wouldn't answer that. Don't you have to contact the attorney? All right.
Procedurally?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so sometimes you meet once and other times because of ongoing. Does the DA himself or herself, because we have females now, I'm happy about that, right? Do they ever call you back themselves to ask further questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then you're free to meet with them as they call you?
Absolutely.
So it's an ongoing exchange between your department and the district attorney's office?
Yes, ma'am. In virtually every case we work, there's an exchange between ourselves. That's who we communicate with. From all of our cases end up there.
Okay.
So we try to get the district attorney involved, especially if it's a significant case, a felony case, or murder or anything. We try to get them involved early on so they know what we're doing. And plus they're going to have to help us with search warrants and arrest warrants and things of that nature.
Right. Without identifying a case, and I'm going to go slow, a district attorney, an incident, by name, number, or anything, has there ever been a time that you've been asked not to meet with a district attorney on a matter?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I'm requesting, what year was that?
2019.
Okay. So I'm going to request, I think I'm getting his chain of command for 2019. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So at that point, you are obligated to follow the order of your higher up, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, from the DA's office, then the DA decides whether or not to charge someone. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So can you all also make arrests prior to the DA charging? Can you make arrests of officers?
Certainly, if there's probable cause exists, we can do so.
Okay. And that still has to go up the chain of command before it happens?
Yes, ma'am.
So you as an investigator and a detective, cannot make an arrest on your own. Like you
Not-
can't
not
just.
without, not without a supervisor knowing that I'm going to, no, not in the state police.
Okay. So you notify the supervisor. And then once you notify the supervisor, is it their call on whether you go physically make that arrest of another trooper? Who makes the final call is what I'm asking. And not in name.
Yes, ma'am. If it was a trooper involved, or whether it's any police officer involved,
Right.
I'm going to go up my chain of command and let them know everything about that case.
And so they would make, someone up the chain of command makes the decision on whether gives you the okay to go physically arrest the officer?
Yes, ma'am. There would certainly be opinions thrown my way, no
Right.
doubt.
And you have to follow at that point what they give you. If they say yes, arrest, then you go arrest. If they say no, don't arrest, then you don't arrest. Is that it?
Pretty much. If there's, yes.
Okay. And so if I'm getting, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask some questions and go slowly, okay? Because I don't want to get into a particular case. So you probably want to turn your mic on if it's not on.
It's on now.
Thank you. And so during those times, has there ever been a time that you have made a report to internal affairs regarding any incidents, not a particular incident, where the chain of command did not allow you to proceed with an investigation? I try to go slow, but then I slow down so you can answer.
The answer is, I don't think I've ever made a complaint to internal affairs concerning that question.
Okay. So who would you, like if someone, let's say your immediate supervisor did not follow your recommendation and you felt like it was right, does it end with your immediate supervisor?
It can.
Regarding in custody death, because that's what we're talking about right now.
If my immediate supervisor refused or didn't want to take my opinion and move forward with an arrest warrant,
Yes.
and I'm going to refer,
If you think this is getting too much into the
I think I can generalize it and
Okay.
just stop it.
Okay.
In any case, and I think I've stated this earlier, and most of the cases that I've been involved in or we get involved in with state police are significant cases. They involve death. They involve
Right.
things that generally require the advice of a district attorney from the get-go.
Right, right.
So although I'm certainly going to keep my chain of command informed, most of the arrest decisions are based on the conversations I have between myself and the district attorney's office. That has been the overriding theme on a majority, or overwhelming number of cases, is those decisions are generally made between the district attorney's office and my office. Involving police officers the same way. Now, I know we can talk about one case, but just the overall theme
Right.
is generally decided there, and I've never had to take it any further than my first line supervisor.
What about the instance where they did not follow your advice you testified about? When those instances, it stops at your supervisor.
The opinions, if I offered an opinion that was turned down, it was an opinion just based on, again, my opinion of what the facts revealed. Being initially turned down might have aggravated me, but it wouldn't have been the point to where, because I know ultimately it doesn't matter what my opinion is
Right,
in the case.
right.
And knowing that, I don't get my feelings hurt. I guess there's an ego thing there that you can put together, but it's not that big a thing with me because I know that there's a process, and as long as I follow the process, then my opinion doesn't matter unless I'm asked of it. My job was simply
Right.
put the facts on paper, and let's make sure the facts get there. If the facts get there, and even though my opinion says we need to do this and a grand jury says we don't need to do that, I move on. I mean, I've been at this too long. I can't get involved in that stuff.
Right,
And
right.
that's where I generally like to let it sit, Senator. I'm well aware of why we're asking those questions. But in this particular, in any incident, that's how I followed it, and I didn't change here, even though there may have been different opinions. Okay, the different opinions cause me to second guess my opinion.
Right.
That's what they do. They say, well, wait a second, am I looking at this right? That's what happens.
Right. So let me ask you, because you say you put it on paper, which means you do a report.
Yes, ma'am.
You give it to your superiors and the district attorney, because the district attorney is involved.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you ever been asked by a superior, without talking about any specific incident, to bury something in a report?
I would say that is.
And that's just a general question. And we're dealing with procedures now, because I'm going to ask a follow-up question as to what happens when a supervisor asks you to bury something in a report.
I think that's almost like cross-examining him as a witness, and what we don't want to do is to try him here. I would rather we just talk in general and not.
Okay,
Just
I'm not
him
asking
and-
did he.
Can we go to the
let me
next
get some
question? Maybe
clarification.
the next question, Senator Jackson, might be,
Well,
if you report something and you don't feel like it's being put in a report, what would you do?
No,
Is
no,
what
that's
your
not
follow-up?
it.
That's
No,
not-
that's
What is your
not
follow,
it.
what is
See,
your
this
question?
is the issue, and I'm not asking him whether he failed to put something in a report. So I'm not asking him to incriminate himself. I'm saying, is there a time that someone in your chain of command asked you to not put something or bury something in a report that you were sending to the DA? So that doesn't, I'm not cross-examining him. I'm not asking him about his wrongdoing or whether he's ever done wrong. I'm asking him, did someone in hierarchy ever ask him to do
But I
something?
think
that
But
was-
what would be
Similar.
I think, why don't you get to the next question after that? So not
And my
did it happen,
question-
but what would you do if it did happen?
I do understand, but I thought, see, that's probably why I get a little confused, because I thought we were here to understand procedure and what we needed to fix. And so we don't know what to fix if we don't know what has happened.
Let's ask him the follow-up question, which is, I think, where you want to go if
Right.
this does happen.
Okay,
Because
so,
whether it's happened or not in the past, we need to know what the procedure is.
right. So what is the procedure if someone in hierarchy asks you to bury something in a report or not report something accurately?
I'm not going to commit a crime for anybody.
Okay, so what do you do at that point?
I don't commit a crime. We continue and we make sure that the information gets to where it needs to go.
So no one proofs your reports or anything. Your report goes directly from you to that district attorney?
Oh, no, there's a proofing process, absolutely.
Okay. So do you have an opportunity to sign off on the report once it's proofed?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so I guess we can't ask pointed questions. And so how do you report if someone asks you to bury something in a report or not report it? Do you have a mechanism in place procedurally to report that supervisor who's asked you to do so? Because at that point, they're asking you to commit a crime, and I'm thinking at that point, there should be some procedure for you to report to the higher-ups that someone in their chain of command has asked you to commit a crime.
Yes, ma'am. There is a procedure, and it was
Okay,
followed.
so what's that procedure?
Report that this incident occurred.
Now, I understand that, but who do you report to? Because now you're in a situation as an officer, as a detective, that your immediate supervisor has asked you to commit a crime. Who do you report that to? Because you can't report it to the person who's asked you to commit the crime.
Once again, we're talking a hypothetical.
Hypothetical, yeah.
Hypothetically, you would report it to anybody that would listen.
Okay, so other officers who share your same status?
Are we talking hypothetical? Because y'all have got me.
Go ahead.
Excuse me,
Somebody
Sen-
requests this guy to commit a crime.
Senator
Are we-
Fields,
are
Senator
we
Fields, excuse me,
talking-
let's just bring this to order. Senator Jackson has the mic right now. I will recognize you
understand.
in just a minute.
reclaim my time later. I'm going to let Senator Fields ask some questions.
Now, are we talking
So,
hypothetical?
all right.
Look, let's
Senator-
stop
Sen-
dancing around this. Are we talking hypothetical? Did somebody request you to commit a crime? Yes or no?
I'm going to
I don't
ask.
think we can get into, there is an ongoing investigation into state.
And I
police
respect
right
that.
now.
You are not his personal lawyer. You're a lawyer for the department.
Yeah.
And we're allowing you to sit there to advise him as the department lawyer, but not his personal lawyer. I want to know, did somebody advise you, I mean, did somebody ask you to commit a crime?
Senator Brown, I'm going to stop right now. This is not the purpose of the committee. The purpose of the committee is to come up with policy for state police. You have the opportunity, if you're being interrogated about something that can incriminate you, to consult with an attorney. You came down here voluntarily. You were not subpoenaed. And so Senator Fields had asked that we keep the questions general. That's why he came down here. That's why he was requested to come down here.
And I understand that, Mr. Chairman. And let me just tell you, I'm going to suggest the gentleman get him a lawyer. Because if somebody suggests that you commit a crime, you should have your personal lawyer here, not the department's lawyer. And I don't have any further questions to the gentleman.
Senator Jackson, did
Thank
you have
you.
anything
And
further?
Yes, I do. And I want to make sure I put on the record again that this gentleman has said he's never committed a crime.
I've never committed a crime, Senator. I don't need an attorney to represent me. I've never violated the law, period. I've reported everything that occurred during this case.
Once
sir.
again, let's not get off on the specific case and your situation. You're here to testify about general policies at the request of the committee, and you're here voluntarily. You came down here to do that. You're not under subpoena. So, Senator Jackson, if you can
Sure.
try to get to an end, I'd appreciate
Yeah,
it.
thank you.
Let me say something, Mr. Chairman.
1 second, Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Brown?
Yes, sir.
Let me just say, I think you're an honorable gentleman. You know, and I think you're under tremendous pressure, not pressure. I just think you're a very honorable gentleman, and I just think, but the thing that bothers me is every time someone come here and try to tell the truth, every single time, and it really frustrates me, they end up either leaving or retiring from state police, or they end up being fired. And that agitates me. You're a good man, a very honorable man.
Thank you.
And every time you make a presentation, the counsel for state police leans over to you, and you do your very best to give us a good, honest answer. And I respect you for that.
Senator Jackson.
Let me finish, Mr.
sorry.
Chairman, if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
You know, and it shouldn't be that way. It just shouldn't be that way. Giving this committee the truth just shouldn't be that hard, you know? And I respect you for that. And every member of this committee respect you for that, you know? And listen, when people come here to talk to a legislative committee, they shouldn't have to go through this. And that's my point. You know, and Senator Jackson, look, I understood every question you have presented here today, and I've listened and I've taken notes, and you've done a very good job. You haven't cross-examined this gentleman. I think you've done a very good job. You know, and I don't think you've crossed some lines. In fact, you've put some questions to the gentleman, and I had no idea what you were talking about until the counsel for the state police started saying you can't talk about that, and that made me think about it was the incident.
And the reason we can't
Let
hold
me
on,
finish,
hold on.
please.
Let Senator Fields finish, please.
And I think we make things too complicated. You know, we're here to figure out how we put procedures in place to make state police a better place for people like him. That's all we're trying to do. We want people like him to wake up in the morning and go to work and not feel any pressure. There are very good people that wake up every morning and they go to work and they do a good job. And they don't need all of this foolishness. And that's why we're here today, to try to get through all these weeds. You know, and look, that's all I have to say, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Fields. Senator Jackson.
Thank you, Senator Fields, because I think you know me by now. We've known each other for years. I was busting at the seams, so thank you for busting out for me on this one, because this is an honorable gentleman. I started with that. I've known him, and he's worked for Troop F, and I've never questioned anything about him, and I would not do that today, nor would I cross-examine him or in any way put him in harm's way. But I think that at some point, there are people who just want to tell their story. and I understand what's happening, but I am going to go back to this procedure, Lieutenant Brown. Procedurally, do you put that complaint in writing at that point? Do you put that report in writing? Because procedurally, if you have someone ever asking you to commit a crime, how do you ensure it goes up to our colonel and others who can address it? What's the procedure?
The procedure for me was to report it to the district attorney, report it to the Department of Justice, and report it to my chain of command, 2 chains of command.
Okay. So, and that's what I'm asking you. Do you put it, when you say report it to the district attorney, do you put it in your overall report?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So you would entertain a meeting at that point with the district attorney to let he or she know that someone in your chain of command has asked you to hide information from them.
I would inform him, yes.
Okay. And then you said you would report it to the Department of Justice. Is that a call made, or is there a form filled out?
It was in person.
In person. After you report it to the Department of Justice, in your now you are, your first chain of command may or may not have asked you, and this is hypothetical, to commit a crime and bury something in a report. At that point, who do you go to next in the chain of command? Not person, but position,
As high as the chain of command goes.
as high as the chain of command goes. And do you put that in writing? Is there a form? That's what I'm asking.
No, ma'am.
And Mr. Chairman, I think that's where I'm going with this question, that our officers who work every day do not have a procedure where they can go into a computer, even though we're computerized, and document that complaint. And that's gonna be my, before I go on my question, because I want to pinpoint right there, that is a part of procedure that has a major defect in it. Any officer on the street, any investigator, any detective should have at that point where he or she can put something in a computer that's submitted to internal affairs, and he or she should be able to print, time, date, and stamp that, stamped, dated, time, and get it to the district attorney. And that way, and if he's not getting it to the district attorney, at least internal affairs, he has something electronically, our officers, that says, this is what happened. Someone in my chain of command asked me to commit a crime, and I have proof that I submitted it. Because I think that's a breakdown in state police. If I'm asked by my superior to commit a crime, there should be something I can electronically put in immediately, instead of having to go over and over and over to different people, instead of having to call the Justice Department, instead of having to call this. Now, if that's ignored, I can understand them having to go outside of the chain of command, outside of state police. But I think that's something that's really valuable that's missing. Because if you time date it and stamp it and it goes in a system and everybody ignores it and it goes immediately up to that person and that person, then no one can say they didn't get it. And that's something I'm going to ask, that a procedure needs to be put in place, not a handwritten report. We got too many computers. Not something that can slip under the rug. A system that stamps it, sends it to one person, or sends it to 2 or 3 people. I would say 2 or 3 people. Because when an officer like Lieutenant Brown or anyone else decides to report his superior, he's going against the grain. And he or she should know that they're protected in reporting illegal activity. I don't see anything in testimony today, and I don't have any reason to believe this gentleman will be untruthful. He's always been truthful, right? That says that there's anything for officers, any procedure for them to report and know it gets up to the chain of command.
And I think you're on the mark there, because that's what our overall goal is to look for recommendations to make state police better. And I think that's something that we will certainly consider putting in our final report of this committee for things that we need to do moving forward. So I appreciate that, Senator Jackson.
And because of the seriousness of it, I will ask, if we put that in the report, that we do it by electronic means, that report doesn't go, or that complaint doesn't go to just one person, that it goes up to the chain of command, that it goes to our colonel's office, simultaneously to internal affairs, and to whoever, I want to say within the troop, but then it goes within the troop and you're immediately treated bad. I think it has to go outside of that troop that you are reporting. And so I don't think
Sure.
it should touch the troop, you know?
And we're not going to come up with a report today.
I know,
that's
but
a
I
good-
just- I'm
that's a
putting
good
those
i-
recommendations on the record.
Are very good ideas for consideration. Now, first, Lieutenant Brown, do you have any more specific questions for him today?
I don't, Lieutenant Brown, but if there's anything you want to say that I didn't ask you, you drove all the way from Monroe, Louisiana. I take that drive you left from home this morning.
I did.
And where's home?
Jonesboro.
So you drove further than I did this morning, right? And so if I've not asked something, we're here for recommendations, procedures, things that we believe need to be changed. In Troop F, you are at the hub of investigations. And so I'd be derelict in my time here if I did all the questioning and did not ask the person who has the most experience that has testified before us in Troop F this question. What procedures would you like to see changed to ensure that your officers have the tools they need, whether it's even budget changes, right? Or that they are able to freely investigate incidents and act on them fast?
I think if there's ever an incident similar to what we've discussed here today, that there should be a reporting system, and there probably is some type of reporting system there as well, but I think that reporting system should include someone outside the loop of state police, such as maybe an elected official who's appointed as well, to get it outside their realms. That way, if you ever run into a situation to where the entire chain of command doesn't want to do anything, at least now you have maybe another alternate person who can look at this and say, well, wait a second, we need to do it. Now, it's probably very rare that you're ever going to run into a situation to where everyone is on board, but let's face it, once you establish a colonel, then everybody answers to that colonel. And that's the way it's going to be from now on. And I'm not saying that that's bad. I'm just saying that maybe that system needs to include someone on the outside looking in.
Thank you. Senator Jackson, does that conclude your question?
It does, and thank you so much for your testimony today, for your honesty, for trying to wade through answering questions for me and not violating anything. You have been honorable since the day I've known you, and thank you for all of your work with state police.
Lieutenant Brown, thank you again for coming today, and safe travels back home.
Thank you.
Members, I'd like to bring Colonel Davis to the table, please.
Yeah, I forgot my procedural question for him. I hope I kept it.
Colonel, if you could state your name for the record, please, and your position.
Colonel Lamar Davis, Louisiana State Police Superintendent, Deputy Secretary.
Colonel, I want to thank you for coming here today. You've come to all of our meetings and provided information to us, and I know it's taken a lot of time out of your schedule, but we feel this is a very important task that we have. I've certainly learned a lot through this process and have some thoughts about recommendations we could do to make things better for your department. So once again, I want to thank you. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is, I was looking at the requirements to be the Colonel of State Police, and it's got to be someone who's come up through the ranks of state police. I'm not clear if a retired person could be colonel or if it has to be someone that is actively in state police. But my question to you is, do you see any negative or downside if we were to make it more broad to allow someone outside of state police to be the superintendent?
Great question. Obviously, there's pros and cons with regards to any type of positions at this level. There's a lot of institutional knowledge, a lot of training, a lot of education that we go through at the state police. As an indicator, when you look at the sheriffs, there's about 1/3 of the sheriffs that are former troopers. Our training program is extensive, probably the most extensive in the entire law enforcement here in the state. And that's for good reason, because we come across, and as mentioned by Lieutenant Brown, we handle an assortment of crimes. We provide a large public safety service to our citizens and our constituents. And it's because of that and that statewide mandate and mission that it's important for us to continue to grow. There's several benefits to coming through, and I mentioned the educational value, also the institutional knowledge that you gain. I've gone through thousands and thousands of hours of training throughout my career, and I've worked this entire state. We talked about with Senator Jackson and Lieutenant Brown as far as speaking. It was mentioned to me the other day that every hour you travel in Louisiana, you change cultures, and no matter which direction you go, there will be something that's significantly different in that culture that's not captured in the other. And our troopers deploy throughout the state, so they are forced to adhere to, forced to learn rapidly different cultures and respond to and service our communities across the state, whether it be through natural disasters, man-made disasters, or otherwise. And it's because of that that, one, we increase that training, but two, it provides a benefit. It provides that institutional knowledge, and that helps during the efficiencies. We have a saying in law enforcement that you don't want to build rapport during the times of emergencies. And that's for good reason, because when people need help, they need us to be proficient. And it's that training, and it's that reason, and it's those benefits why we believe that it's best for the superintendent to come from within the ranks. I mentioned all of the training that I've gone through, but servicing and working in a statewide capacity gave me the opportunity to also learn the communities and learn the cultures. And as I've been able to do so, that now provides a benefit to me as the superintendent to be able to provide a service, deploy resources efficiently, effectively, to know that I should not deploy a SWAT team in a service or a natural disaster type environment. And if we fail to do that, then the end result could be catastrophic. It could end with loss of life. So for those reasons, I think it's very beneficial that, one, we have someone come through. We also talk about this, and I'll close with this. When we talk about taking advantage of the talent of our state, succession planning is huge with us. Even when you graduate and you finish and you retire from state police, generally they go on to service other communities where they live. But when you cannot see someone and you cannot see that growth or that opportunity, then we lose talent. They go elsewhere. They leave the state. And I'll tell you from a personal standpoint, when I came to this profession, I wasn't one of those guys where this is something I always wanted to do. But when I came to this profession and I began to see and I saw Colonel Landry rise to the rank of superintendent, then they gave me belief that I could also rise to the rank of superintendent. I could one day take advantage of the talents, take advantage of the education, take advantage of those things that have been provided to me, and then use those to help others. So it was through that experience of seeing Colonel Landry, who came from the ranks of within, Colonel Whitehorn, who came from the ranks of within. And, this agency has been predominantly white male. There's no secret about it. But we've got to make change. And in order to make changes, we have to understand the agency. So having worked here, having also spent 21 years in the military, having deployed across the world, it's been a best practice, whether it be militarily, whether it be organizationally, whether it be through law enforcement, for those superintendents and those ranking individuals to come from within. And that served a great benefit. Now, there are some cons to it because, as we say, sometimes you're limited by your own experience, which means that if all you know and all you grow is from within, then that could cause some concern. My answer to that is invest in our people, just like we invest in our students. We want to keep our talented students here. We want to keep our talent here. Let's invest in our people. Let's grow them, and then let's promote them and let them know that it's possible.
And I asked that question, one of the things you pointed out was about the military. You and I both served in the military, and as you know, we promote within our ranks the generals and the admirals, but the civilian supervisors, who are their secretaries, many times come from outside of the military, or it may be someone that's retired, but they have to be retired a number of years before they can take over. And of course, right now, functionally, you're the head of state police, even though we know in the organizational chart it shows Secretary LeBlanc. So Anyway, that's why I asked the question. The other thing, and I know you know this because we've talked about it with you and your staff, we are getting to a point now where we've taken a lot of testimony, and we would appreciate it if you would get with your staff and submit to us some of the recommendations you think that you need our help from a legislative standpoint so we can give those consideration.
Yes, sir.
Senator Jackson has some questions.
Thank you. Just some follow-up on the body cam questions, Colonel. And let me say this. I want to thank you and your officers so much. We started a new project throughout District 34. And my goal was, because of the cloud that right now hangs over our Troop F, because that's the reality of what we're living with right now in that area, was to for officers to volunteer to get back out in the community to let kids, know and others know that they're real people and that what they're seeing in the news every day doesn't pertain to everyone. And I've always said that even when we started this committee, that one officer who fails to act is not the reflection of every trooper that wears that suit.
Yes, ma'am.
And that you guys put your life on the line every day. So we started a project, and it was the Garden Project. And so troopers were in Tensall Parish with us. They did more work than I did. Let me say that. Putting those garden boxes together, they carried more stuff than I did.
I would expect them to, man.
Right. And one of them was in great shape, so we let him do a lot of the work. And they were engaged with our children, and that's what's important to me. As equally important as these hearings are, because they're very important, is to allow our communities and throughout Troop F and the 12 parishes to know that good officers exist.
Yes, ma'am.
And they're there to protect and serve, and they're there to lend a helping hand. And that happened on last Saturday. And so I want to sincerely thank those officers on the record. I didn't have my list of names. I bought them a little something from District 34, and I need to get it to the troop because they came from other troops. But to see them interacting with young folks again, and that's what I really want to see happen, is that we are a community law enforcement group, that we understand that arrests have to be made, but we also understand that people need to know the true value of who's serving them.
Yes, ma'am.
And so thank you for that. My question is on the line of this new camera system that I'm still trying to understand. Now, Mr. Brown, Lieutenant Brown, I apologize, didn't know, because he hasn't had to access it recently, whether or not he knows he can pull up all cameras from an incident. He knows that he can, even if it's not labeled, pull up the time frames. The question is, do they still have to go in and request permission to see those videos? I know they can see they're there, but do they still have to request permission to view those videos?
No, ma'am. All general, and let me stipulate.
Okay.
There are some videos based upon sensitivity of investigation. So if there's an investigation of a public official, investigation of a law enforcement officer, something of that nature, whereby it's a sensitive matter, then we do restrict those videos. And only those people that are conducting the investigation at that particular time and personnel within the chain of command are authorized to view those videos. And that's out of respect for
No, I get that, yeah.
for those. But otherwise, they have unlimited access to view videos in general.
So I was speaking to him on in-custody deaths.
Mm-hmm.
So with in-custody deaths, that detective comes to the scene, and then everything's uploaded. And in-custody deaths, is there a time? Does that ever fit within that category?
Yes, ma'am. Those are one of the categories by which we want only those investigations, because what we don't want to do is impede the integrity of the investigation. So we automatically, as protocol, will what I call restrict access to only those that are investigating it.
Okay. When you restrict access, because that's what I want to talk about, and I understand the need to restrict access because you don't want someone who's involved in it being able to go back and view their video and get their story together. Trust me, I'm an attorney, I understand that. And I think that's why I've never complained about the restrictive access, because I know how that is. Some, 2 or 3 guys can go back and watch their videos and they've been on the scene, and then they can confer on what they're going to tell the investigators. So I understand restrictive. But there are 3 to 4 people, maybe 5, I think Lieutenant Brown testified to at each troop. That's an investigation. Do you release those videos automatically to them without them having, do you put their name on a restrictive access list?
So generally, that criminal investigative division commander.
See, that's what I didn't know technical name.
And or investigator
Okay.
would make that request. We have a certain type of investigation. We need to restrict the access. Here's the list of personnel that
Okay.
need to be provided access to view these videos. And then from there, they send it to our technology and business support section. And from there, we create that restrictive access.
So at the top level, you don't you create it, but it's by the request of someone else.
Yes, I will approve it ultimately, but generally, the way that the policy is set up is it has to be a commander. I want someone with one experience
Right.
and also authority to be able to review that situation to make a determination. And at that point, they will make a request to the commander of the technology and business support section, and from there, that's how they create the restrictive
And
access.
so, yeah, that makes sense. So the thing I'm requesting is that in this restrictive access, that if you have, and you said that's the correct terminology, whatever the investigative department is,
Yes, ma'am.
that when you restrict it, that they're included to have access.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's what I would ask, because I don't know who says who names or who should have access, but if it's 4 or 5 people in that criminal division, unless one of those persons are under investigation, I would think it's logical that everyone that's investigating that case should have access, and they should be on every restrictive list that comes up.
Not necessarily. They are on that restrictive list.
Right.
I have another investigation going on in another part of the state,
Right.
and they do not have.
No, that's what I mean.
Oh,
To
yes,
that,
ma'am.
to that. If I'm in
Yes,
Troop
ma'am.
F,
Yes,
then
ma'am.
even if a restrictive list comes up, are those 4 names that are detectives automatically added to that restrictive list? I guess is the best question.
For the case that they're
For
investigating,
the
yes, ma'am.
case. Okay.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
they're automatically.
Not automatically, because we don't know who may be out, who may be on vacation. So whoever is working it, and again, to your point, if one of those personnel may be under investigation, we don't want to
Right,
automatically
right.
provide them access to help further their cause. So no, it is a case by case, depending upon
Yeah.
who is investigating and who is involved.
So you're working with integrity. You're working with, and I understand that, protecting the integrity of the investigation.
Yes, ma'am.
And making sure those who need it have access.
Yes, ma'am.
Without it floating to someone who may be a part of that investigation.
That's correct.
That's why it's a case by case.
And it should not have to come up to me. I mean, every request,
right.
that's why we have those captains working that out at their levels. They're the operational piece of that.
Right. And the one request that I made today, and that I think Lieutenant Brown chimed in on a little bit, is the request to have some type of electronic system put in place, that when an officer is asked to do something that may be criminal or borderline, or he or she thinks is criminal, because I know it's a matter of opinion. But I think some stuff is just blatant. You know, if you're asked to bury something in a report, if you're asked not to call a witness, if you ask not to meet with the district attorney, and he or she wants to complain, I think that officer, and that's about keeping the relationship between the officers and those higher up, should have some type of electronic system where the officer that he or she is complaining about does not have immediate access to that. And that's something I'd be concerned about if I'm going in to complain on one of my superiors, okay? I wouldn't want my superior in that type of electronic system we're requesting to have immediate access to that. And so if you decide to take that recommendation, if this committee decides to make that recommendation, my issue would be that it goes up to your office as well. Because I would want that's where I think you need to be included, at that point as the colonel, and not just you, whoever sits in that position, that if one of your officers that is in a supervisory role has asked another officer to do something nefarious, I think that's something that the colonel needs to know immediately. Because I don't want, and this is just for me, for your protection, because you're sitting here, and most of the superiors don't sit here, right? And you're coming every day with your troopers asking for budget, and you're facing us every day. I just don't think there should ever be a time that a complaint goes to an officer and it's going to go outside of your office, that complaint doesn't also come to you. And that's what I would request. And I know people saying take it outside of state police, but I want to respect your position and say that should come to you as well, because you could walk out of here and get a camera stuck in your face because somebody's made a complaint and it never came to you. And so in that electronic system, there's 2 things I'd like to include: that it goes to someone outside of state police, maybe, and And I think we haven't really clarified who supervises besides the colonel. So I'm not going to make a recommendation on who that should go to. I know that the governor appoints, right? Technically, and maybe it should go to his attorney, right? Whoever that governor is at the time, so that he has knowledge. I think it should go to the colonel, because the colonel needs to know internally what's going on in his or her department at any time. I say her because we may have one day. And I think it should also go to an outside, outside source we've talked about. But who I don't think should get a hold of it is anyone in that immediate troop, unless the colonel sees that the troop leader is not the person that the complaint is being made on. Does that make sense? Because when you first file something from any troop, like let's say my troop, Troop F, and the colonel is the person that reports to you, you know, that you're complaining about. So if we initially trigger it to go to that leader of Troop F, then they may get it. But I think it should go up to chain of command first to see who needs to be involved. That would be my request, because I think officers then are more likely to report immediately instead of wondering whether the person that's sitting in the office with them is going to get that first.
Yes, ma'am. And to your point, we've already started moving in that direction. You know, one of the, and back in, I think, 2017, 2018, there was a study conducted by, and I think I may have mentioned this, by Office of Technology Services, whereby they identified DPS as being like 1/3 of the state's most outdated, antiquated technology, and also vulnerability. But through that process, as we went through DPS and as I've come into this position, I've worked extremely hard to identify a lot of those gaps. We are currently working on modernizing and making electronic all forms. Now, as far as the complaint procedures, we have redundancies built in automatically. If a trooper, an employee of any sort, feel that they've been told to do something that they shouldn't be done, or file a grievance or file a complaint, one, they have internal affairs.
Right.
And that's they've been advised of that availability. And that doesn't require them to go through their chain of command. They can go straight to internal affairs. The second thing is we have a grievance procedure. And that grievance procedure is outlined, and I'll make sure that you get that information as well. There's a form that they fill out, and from there, that comes all the way up to me.
And
Okay?
that's what I'm concerned about, the form.
Well,
I would like to see it electronically.
yes, ma'am, and we are working on making that electronic. And then, of course, we have in policy 209, we have our complaints procedure, which we do, again, have a form where if there is a complaint formed against, whether it be by the public or internal, formed against our personnel, that they can fill that out.
Right.
And
right.
as they do, and it doesn't have to be in that form. It can be an email. If an email is received with allegations, then at that particular point in time, it's forwarded. If it's not received by internal affairs, it's forwarded to internal affairs, and they will take a look at it.
But you are aware, though, and that's what my concern would be, that
Yes,
the
ma'am.
colonel would be aware.
I am, as part of my policy, any allegations of criminal activity against my personnel, I'm made aware immediately. Now, to the last point, as far as going outside, in looking at what has transpired, and I advise you all that I've really made some significant changes. One of those changes includes a force investigative unit. So whenever there's an in-custody death, whenever there's an officer-involved shooting, then we have certain procedures, we have a certain team, and it's built based upon internal affairs and integrity team. But we're also building in and working with the federal authorities to provide automatic access so that we can shoot to them, or we can disseminate to them, any allegations that may involve civil rights violations. And I believe that's, one, not only in the best interest of the state and our citizens, but also it's a best practice. So we are currently already moving in that direction. And once we get that finished, I think we will be the first agency in the nation to have that already set up.
Okay. And you talked about a report, and you said something about you had some of the worst technology. Now, we've moved past that, right?
We are currently moving past that. So we have for the first time ever, a statewide case management system.
Okay.
We have, for the first time ever, a computer-aided dispatch, and both of those are accounts, whether it be the computer-aided dispatch system, which is we refer to as a CAD system, that documents all of our interactions with the public. If we go out and go to a crash, if we're called to respond to something, it's automatically documented, whether it comes in as a telephone call or however. And that starts that documentation trail. And what those systems do, what they do is they build in accountability. So before then, we did not have that. We had desk logs. If you wanted to know what happened at Troop F, well, you had to call Troop F. You had to go through Troop F. But with this is statewide. So I have the ability to go in. My deputy superintendents have the ability to go in. Their captains, their majors have the ability to go in and check and see what their personnel are doing. And also build in that accountability and see what those first line supervisors are doing. And I think as we continue to perfect this system and build this system, then what you will see is that we will be able to identify a lot of issues that we may have early on and ensure that we take care of them so they do not become larger issues. But beyond that, we're also creating a e-citation solution and system. And again, total electronic. And that will connect with our CAD and RMS system. And then from there, an e-crash solution that we expect to have deployed by the end of this year. So by creating and building those electronic systems, it gives us a lot more accountability, a lot more information, a lot more analytics. And that helps us all in making sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, how we're supposed to be doing it.
Well, thank you. And I also want to thank you in general, because I understand that you were thrust into these committees, that you were not the colonel when any incidents or anything giving rise to this committee occurred.
Yes, ma'am.
But you have been here every time. You've been extremely respectful, and I want to thank you for that, because when you first take on a new job, I know the one thing you don't think is you're going to be before a legislative committee every other month on an issue that's somewhat unrelated to the duties that you have to perform right now. And so I want to thank you and your staff for being here.
Yes, ma'am.
Although you didn't let me ask a lot of questions, but I want to thank you and your staff for being here.
Thank you, ma'am, and I appreciate your leadership. You know, I have learned, and I would be remiss if I didn't tell you at times that it has been overwhelming. But to be honest, I'm living my purpose.
Right.
And it took me a minute to understand what my purpose was. But I'm living my purpose, and I feel like, you know, we're making some significant changes. And that's what matters to me. So if this is what we have to go through, then I'll be here every time.
I found in history that sometimes turbulence happens for change to come,
Yes, ma'am.
and that the change maker is not always the one that was involved in the turbulence, but there's calm after the storm. I am believing from my time knowing you that you will be the calm after the storm that the state police has seen.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Boudreaux.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. Thank you also, Colonel. You know, when we started this several months back, there's a lot of pressure to make things public. I know Captain Burns sent out some information on last evening as to some of the initiatives that since your appointment in October of 2020. And I appreciate that information, and I would encourage that that be made public.
Yes,
I
sir.
think those are significant changes. My disappointment is that when the bad stuff happens, it's on the front page and it gets repeated and then it gets misconstrued and everything. These are some positive changes to address issues, and Senator Jackson just hit on it, issues that you inherited. But I'd ask that you all make that part of the website and get it out there. I also want to say that you know, there's a lot of work, and we talked about it in finance earlier this week. There was no. It was the objective when this committee got formed was that I knew and you knew, and I think every man and lady that sits on this panel knew that it wasn't going to get fixed overnight. and that it was going to be a long journey, and that we were going to hit some hurdles, and we've hit some, and there are more to hit. But I just want to encourage you and your team to continue to do what's best for this agency. As you said, you're identifying your purpose. You have been charged with that task, and I ask that you continue this. I know there's a committee that has been formed on the House side. There are a number of federal investigations that are still going on. I just don't want people to think that it's going to go away tomorrow. But the things that you put in that report that I reviewed on last evening, it's the beginning of a process, beginning of a change. And the denial part that we have seen at this table in the past can no longer be tolerated.
Yes, sir.
We cannot pretend that this agency is hunky-dory and everything is fine. That is not a fact. We have specific instances, and we have investigations that'll go on for some time. So I'll close by just saying that it's never easy when there are problems. And if you and your team can stay at the table, you've taken the criticism. I think I told you early on that there was just too much starch in your shirt. I want you to take the shirt off when you put it in the dryer and then put it on, because and you've rolled up your sleeves, and so has the team. And I'm gonna ask that continues, so that we can get to the bottom of all of the problems and come up with some solutions. And that's when we win that public trust back. So, we're never gonna be finished. It's always going to be a work in progress. But by acknowledging, identifying, and coming up with some solutions. Senator Fields started it off today. We don't have the answer as to where state police should be. We know it's not a good field for corrections,
Sir.
but we got to work together to get there. But we got to get the public trust back on our side.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Boudreaux. Senator Fields.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real quickly, and this is just for you to just think on, giving some serious thought. I want you to give some serious thought about maybe dividing the superintendent position and the deputy secretary of public safety position. And just following up with what the chairman said, I do think that there is some good merit to having the superintendent as a kind of a non-ranking, a person who doesn't necessarily come up in the ranks of state police, make that more of a layman sort of person. Let that person be from the outside, and then have a deputy secretary person. But just initially, what's your thoughts of dividing that position? Because there's no requirement that person be one of the same. Have a superintendent of state police, and then have a deputy secretary of public safety. Just what's your thoughts about that?
So, great question, Senator. As I mentioned before, there's always pros and cons to that, and I think I've seen it both ways. And really looking at it and talking to some of my counterparts across the country, there is a definite concern with regards to having someone who doesn't understand the efficiencies as well as the operations of those other components. You know, when we look at the Office of Motor Vehicles, it's a statewide system, and they have offices across the state. And oftentimes when they have an emergency, they have a situation that needs us to respond to, then we understand what they have. And by virtue of having that understanding, I can send the correct approach, response and or personnel. I won't go too far into it because that's really y'all's decision and the governor's decision. And I will tell you this, no matter where you put me, you're going to get my best.
Got it. Yeah. Because state police need to just concentrate on state police, and then the deputy secretary perhaps can handle all of the other issues. Secondly, we back in December we talked about putting a check on each of the reports as it relates to whether or not there's video available. Have you made any progress with that issue?
Let me double check. Have we finalized that, Robert? Okay, I believe we completed that, but I will get
At
you
our
an
next
answer.
meeting, if
Yes,
you
sir.
can give me some report as to how successful have we been with that, because that's real critical in my view. And then the last point is you started several months ago an audit committee. I'm about to shut it down. An audit committee on looking at all of these videos, and then you disbanded. Where are we with that? Because that's crucial. We got a whole vault of videos that we have not been able to get through. Where are we with that?
Well, I appreciate you. We've worked tremendously hard on, as you well know, we had to have disbanded that because of some leaks and other incidents that occurred. So I sought advice from other agencies. I sought the service of an organization that has worked with the federal authorities on conducting assessments, the Bowman Group, and I'm thankful and I'm glad to report that we have secured their services. And in fact, this evening we will have our kickoff meeting. And part of their assessment, they're going to do an overall assessment, but part of that assessment will include video review, use of force review, among many other things that I've reported. So I will, again, report that to the committee as well, that they will come in, they will do an overall assessment of state police, inclusive of the video review. I am also happy to bring them before you. They will gladly come and talk to you and explain their process and answer any questions you all may have.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Colonel, that's all we have for you at this time. I would ask that you stick around till the end of the meeting because we may have a few more remarks, but I do have some witnesses I need to call.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So I have a card from Katie Ryan with Campaign Zero who would like to speak. Go ahead and come up to the table, please. And also, while you're making your way up, let me put in the record that we also received some emails and exhibits from Aston O'Dyer. They will be scanned and made part of today's record, and they will also be disseminated to all the members to review. Ms. Ryan, if you could introduce yourself and please provide your testimony.
Yeah, I'm also like the 12th person to let the seat slam, so apologies for that. It's not a lot of cushion there. So my name is Katie Ryan. I'm the Chief of Staff with Campaign Zero. We are a research-based and data-driven nonprofit. We look into instances of police violence and look for policy solutions to help correct for those. So I'm actually here today to implore the state of Louisiana to join the 19 other states that have legislated and adopted more restrictive use of force policies for their law enforcement officers. Specifically, we know that there are 8 policies that, when used in conjunction with one another, the data shows are reduce instances of police violence, increase officer accountability, and also decrease the likelihood that officers would be assaulted or killed in the line of duty. So those 8 policies are: 1, a ban on neck restraints, right, which are chokeholds, both intended to restrict the airway of individuals, but also restrict the blood flow via carotid arteries. That practice, again, in now 15 states has been banned, and we're imploring Louisiana to join that set of states. As part of the 8 policies that we also know, again, data has substantiated, reduce instances of violence against police officers, are requiring officers to use de-escalation strategies and techniques before employing any type of force, and also to exhaust all alternatives, all lesser means of force, before using the last resort of deadly force, and additionally to provide a verbal warning so that individuals have an opportunity to comply. That currently is not the expectation across the state, and we believe that individuals should know if officers are going to resort to deadly force. The additional 4 policies in our in what is encompassed in our study is ensuring that officers are both trained on and are held to a use of force continuum or matrix, right, which is essentially showing that officers proportional responses respective to the varying levels of resistance that they would encounter, requiring that officers intervene if they witness fellow officers utilizing excessive force, requiring a comprehensive reporting system, which means that anytime an officer draws and aims their firearm at a civilian, that which automatically escalates a situation would actually be reported and made available to civilian oversight. And lastly, we very strongly recommend that there be a categorical prohibition on shooting at moving vehicles. I'm sure you all are well aware of a lot of the cases in Louisiana where this practice has led to deaths, including 6-year-old Jeremy Martis, who was shot in a moving vehicle by a law enforcement officer, and then just a few weeks ago, a gentleman by the name of Daniel Vallee that was also killed. All of these policies are very common sense. They're very straightforward. They are being employed throughout the nation, and they are also budget neutral, right? So these are policies that could be adopted today. And again, our data has shown that, in fact, they reduce instances of police violence and also decrease the likelihood of officers themselves being assaulted.
Ms. Ryan, I want to thank you for coming today. And if you have any written materials you would like to submit to us to review, send them to the Judiciary C staff.
Great.
And we will get those to all of us to consider, because we are getting to the point now where we're looking to put in some recommendations.
For sure. And of course, we welcome a partnership. We've worked now in 350 cities and 32 states. So happy to help assist with that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Captain Burns, can you ask the Colonel to step back in? Members of the committee, we are actually probably getting near the end of the testimony that we'll be taking. We are currently in existence under the President's authority till October, but my hope is now that we've gotten a lot of information, we can start working towards a recommendation for some solutions. And so I'm going to be working with staff to do that, and we will. And so if any of you have anything in particular you'd like to be included in the report for consideration, please get that to the staff, and then we'll figure out when our next meeting will be at that point. Colonel, thanks for coming back in. President Cortez had some questions for you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. No real questions, Colonel, but I did want to make a few comments. First of all, I want to thank you for your appearance. I want to thank you for your transparency and your willingness to be at the committee each and every time you've been asked to be here. I want to thank the committee members. When this select committee was established, there were some incidents that occurred throughout our state, some that have been well documented in the Capital Region and some in Northeast Louisiana. And so it's no accident that the members chosen to be on this committee are representative of those areas. We wanted to make sure they had an opportunity to speak to whatever deficiencies we have in this agency, that we could surface those and come up with policies or initiatives that could either be internally implemented or through statute or resolution. The legislature could have some input into the changes to make it a better agency. I think before I go any further, I want to thank Senator Foyle for his leadership as the chair of this committee, Senator Fields as the vice chair of the committee. Thank you for all that you have done to manage this, because it is a very emotional topic. We don't take any of this lightly. As the legislature and the policy-making body of the state, we need to make sure that our policies and the agencies that implement them do so with the best interest of the citizens. And I think you are a shining example of that. What I think we've learned, and I have been listening into the meetings from afar. I haven't attended every meeting, but I've been listening into the meetings. The intent of this select committee, the mission, was to look at the agency and to come up with best practices, not to litigate a case. Obviously, some of those cases were brought forward, and we had to discuss the deficiencies that occurred within those particular incidents. I think we did that, and I commend the committee for refraining from getting too deeply involved in an investigation, because that's not our purpose here. Our purpose is to understand it and then to make recommendations. The select committee process in the Senate meets during the interim. As you all know, Monday we go into the regular session, and this committee will be some degree prohibited, absent of a special circumstance, from meeting during the regular session due to our standing committees having to meet. So Senator Foyle was correct. There's still plenty of time for this committee to meet upon adjournment of the regular session, should we need to meet. The mission was also to report back. But I'm going to make a quick comment about what we've learned, at least what I have learned, and I'm going to let the committee tell the Senate and the legislature what they have learned later through the document that they're going to put forward. I believe what we've learned is that, or the knowledge we had, and what the public needs to know, is that there is a large number of highly qualified individuals that work within the state police agency that are hard workers, that get up every day to protect the citizens of the state of Louisiana. We do know that there were some incidents that have to some degree put a black eye on the state of Louisiana State Police Agency. Someone said it earlier, I think Senator Boudreaux, we need to look forward, looking backward to learn, looking forward and improving. The goal was that we want this agency to be the shining star nationally of all agencies in the 50 states. And I think that's the goal of this committee, to come up with those policies, procedures, and get those implemented and remain in oversight. And so while many of the members here sit on some of the judiciary committees that have oversight of our police forces, Senator Foyle, of course, is the chairman of the Judiciary C Committee. I think during the regular session, you're going to find that there's still going to be some conversation. I don't want to leave here without recognizing our House colleagues have a special select committee. My understanding, they will be meeting during the regular session to surface a particular incident and discussions behind that. That's not the purpose of this committee. So to the members of the committee, again, job well done. Look forward to hearing your proposals and those things that you believe we can do, or we have learned and we can implement to make this the shining star nationally as an agency. So Colonel Davis, with that, any comments you would have, I just want to again thank you for being here.
Thank you, sir. And if I may, I would like to thank you for your leadership. Like all of you all, I don't like how we got here. I don't. But we're here, we're owning it, we're fixing it. And I thank you so much for caring not only about the state, but about our agency. The men and women of our agency, they go out every day. They risk their lives. They put the public, they put everybody before themselves, and at times I have to push them back. But knowing that we have state leaders that care, that's what really matters. So I want to thank you all for your leadership. Thank you all for your support. And just know that we're committed to being the best agency, not here in the state, but in the nation, in the world.
We thank you for that. Senator Foyle, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I want to echo your comments to the Colonel, that we do appreciate what you've done, and we appreciate what your troopers do throughout this state. You know, once again, some people think this committee is simply looking to be critical, and that's not at all the case. Our mission here is to come up with solutions to help Louisiana State Police be even a better agency, or be the best agency it can be, and that's what our goal is. And once again, thank you, Mr. President, for your leadership and for giving all of us the opportunity to have these committee hearings to learn this valuable information. And I do think we will come up with some good recommendations for for you and for the body. Any other questions or comments from any of the members? Senator Boudreaux moves that we adjourn.